Hello and welcome to this video on naming conventions and file structures. To get started straight away, why is it important to have these naming conventions and a solid file structure? Well, overall, it's to help you stay organized and to know exactly where your documents are sitting. Not only this, when you come to share documents out with other people, it also enables them to know exactly what the file is, as well as where they can access it later on as well. An additional benefit of also naming these files in an appropriate manner is that if data is lost, whether that is for a technical issue or you've just misplaced a file, they're a lot more easy to recover later on. Before we get started, one thing that I want to say is that everyone is different. Things that you might see in this session might not work with you, and that's totally fine. All I want to say is that we want to be looking at organizing things effectively and not just having organized chaos. So if you do have a folder structure that works well with you, but it might not be shown in this video, use whatever feels more comfortable with you. As long as it's organized and structured and you can retrieve your files later on, that's perfectly fine. So there's two primary things that you want to organize. The first being your folder structure and then your file names. Before we get started in either of those, I want to talk about things that you need to avoid using, whether that is in your folder structure or your file names. The first one is spaces in file names. Essentially, spaces can be used in coding for various different things, and if you start adding them into your file names, if something does happen, it won't be able to retrieve it later, as software might interpret those spaces as something different. The same goes with these symbols on the screen. You don't want to use any of these symbols just because some softwares might not recognize them and might replace them later on. Additionally, you want to avoid general terms in documents. I have the example of PowerPoint for Unit 1. What happens if I have multiple PowerPoints for Unit 1, for example? So we'll try and avoid general terms, and we'll get into some examples of what you can use instead a little bit later on in this video. Additionally, try to avoid repetition in file names and folder structures, as if you're calling something the same multiple times as you're going along, or even in the same file name, it's not really needed, and it can cause some confusion later on. And avoid long titles. Get to the point, you need to be able to read them, and if you are looking for a file, you don't want to type out this really long file name just to find this one item. One thing that's really important is understanding where to save things to. Now, I like to save them to two locations, and I'd recommend these two. Now, you can use different platforms, but generally what you want to save to is you'll want to save one copy to the cloud. As a University of Staffordshire member, you will have access to OneDrive as it is part of your Microsoft package, so be sure to utilize your OneDrive to save content too. For those who don't know, cloud storage essentially is an online version of a storage area. So anything you upload to there will be saved online and you can access it later on different devices at different times and different locations. It also enables you to share a document out and other users to interact with that document at a different time too. The other place to save a document to would be a local copy. And what we mean by this is saving it to a device you're working on. Now, this might be a personal computer, could be a laptop, or a mobile device, but make sure you save it to that device too. And the reason that this is important is, let's say your laptop or computer breaks, you have a copy saved to OneDrive, you're able to work on a different device to carry on working on that file. Additionally though, what happens when the internet goes down? You might not be able to access that OneDrive version or cloud version, so having a local copy allows you to carry on working offline. It's really important then to make sure that you keep an up-to-date version on both of these platforms just in case anything does happen. So moving over to folder structures then. Folder structures is the basis of foundation for your organization because this is where everything will sit inside. To start, you'll want to create core folders. So these are things that you'll consider as primary categories, which everything else will be retained into. So in a personal example, this might be a photos folder where you place all of your photos in, and then you might have another folder where you might keep some personal documents in. In an educational setting, I've got a great example on the screen. We have one for different units of work at university. On the right hand side, I do have one for my staff life too, so you'll be able to see I have teaching sessions, session planning, video projects, and so on. Typically, as a good rule of thumb, I would add a number to the start of these naming conventions, because typically when a file explorer sorts folders, it will start looking at the number first and will assign the number as a higher priority. So for example, 01 will always sit above the letter A, so I'm able then to sort that out into frequently used folders. So as you look on my screen here where I've got my files and I've got teaching session 1, that is something that I access frequently, so I've put that as 01 just so that's pinned right to the top. And then those ones from there cascade down into files that I'll use more frequently to less frequently based on a number. Inside of those core files then, we have more files that break into different areas. Now this just allows me to catalog different files depending on how much are going into these core files. So for example, I've got Unit 3 editing. Here you'll see we have an assignments folder, editing examples, learning resources, and reading materials. This just allows me to store these in a way and a place that I know they sit in, so I can access them easier later on. Now, depending on how much content needs to go in them, you can carry on using the number format that we used in the core files, or you can just have name folders pointing to the different areas as well. A nice thing on OneDrive is you can also color coordinate these files too. So as you can see on both of my examples, I have different colors just representing different folders on there. These colors can mean something to you. These folders on my screen, I don't have a color code, I just like the different folder looks, and it just allows me really to visualize that different things sit in different areas. Moving over then to file names, we set the folder structure up, but now we need to sort out file names. Generally, how you want to organize your files to promote a nice, healthy file explorer and organization to those folders then is to break it down into name of document, date, and the name of a person if you're collaborating on something. You'll also want to include the version number. So if you are working on drafts, that might be version 1, version 2, version 3, for example. And then also avoid generic words. So I've got some different ways that you might present this. So starting with this one, we have the date at the front, and you'll always want to start the date with the year, the month, and the day. Then you'll have no spaces in between. I've just separated it with capitalization. We have exactly what the document is, dissertation draft, then I have the version at the end. So this is version 1. You can also organize this in another way. So this example on the screen here, we have Unit 1, dissertation draft, version 1, followed by the date as well. Now, if you are wanting to break your words up, you can do something like this. I have the date, then I have the underscore that's separating up what the document is. I have dissertation underscore draft underscore version 1. When you come to save the next version, maybe you've worked on it a day later, I'd always recommend keeping the file temporarily and just creating the version 2, updating the date. So this might be the 16th and then update with version 2 instead. Typically, as you create more versions, you'll want to delete the older versions, just firstly to free up file space, but it also promotes healthy organization of folder structures as well. When you come to deliver a final document, whether that is a dissertation or something that goes on a website, it's really important to have clear file names then. You can follow the previous rules, so keeping the date, keeping the underscores. However, it's really important to understand where a document's going. If a document is going to be reviewed and replaced later in the future, such as a health and safety document that gets reviewed every couple of years, You might just want to opt with having the date followed by the file name. So for my example, I have 2025 underscore November underscore digital clutter. But if it's not a document that's going to be reviewed and it is a final piece, such as a submission, you might not want to have the date on. So instead, you can opt for something like your name underscore dissertation, or you might want to opt for something like your name followed by underscore title of the document. My example here is my name, so it can be my initials or it can be my name underscore the title of the document. My example is why film lighting is important. This can be the document of your dissertation, but also it can just be dissertation too.